You reach a certain age and think you've seen it all. Watched neighborhoods change, raised kids, maybe even served on a committee or two. You learn to let the small stuff slide, to pick your battles, and to enjoy your hard-earned peace. That's what I thought I had, peace, until the blue and red lights flashed across my backyard, painting my azaleas in panic, and I realized just how far things had spiraled. Officer Thompson stood at my pool gate with a notepad in hand, while a soaking wet teenager pointed at me like I was the villain in a crime drama. His voice cracked with rehearsed emotion as he claimed I'd locked him out illegally and threatened him. But I've lived long enough to recognize the look in someone's eyes when they're piecing together the real story. Officer Thompson wasn't buying it. The kid's tale had more holes than a colander, and I had the receipts to prove it. Let me take you back a few weeks. My name's David. I've been living in the Maple Ridge subdivision for a solid 5 years, long enough to remember when neighbors brought pies instead of problems. Things were quiet, mostly. No drama, no issues. Then everything shifted. It started with the HOA elections. We got ourselves a new president, Karen Patton. She lived next door, and from the moment she took the reins, it was like she'd been handed a crown. Every morning, she strutted the sidewalks with her clipboard like a general on patrol, scanning for anything she could deem a violation. I'd seen folks like her before, always ready to take a little power and run a marathon with it. My backyard had always been my haven. After long days at the accounting firm, I'd come home, slide into that pool, and let the world melt away. It was my own little escape. The previous neighbors understood boundaries, but Karen? She had her own ideas. At first, it was harmless. Compliments about the pool, comments about how nice it would be if others could enjoy it too. I chalked it up to neighborly small talk. Then one afternoon, I found my pool gate wide open. I assumed I'd forgotten to latch it, but when I checked the security camera footage, because yes, I've lived long enough to know it's smart to have cameras, there they were. Karen's teenage son, Tyler, and a trio of his friends were splashing around like it was their backyard barbecue. Wet towels strewn over my patio furniture, empty soda cans floating near the edge. It looked like a scene out of a teen movie. I walked next door, still trying to be civil. Karen greeted me with that smile, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes. I calmly explained what I saw, even showed her screenshots from my phone. She barely glanced at them before brushing it off. Then came the kicker. She said, as HOA president, she had shared access rights to exterior amenities, including my pool. I just stood there, stunned. Did she really believe being HOA president meant she could trespass on private property? I tried to explain the difference between private property and community spaces, but she just smiled and suggested I read the bylaws. Then she shut the door in my face. Well, I took her advice. That very night, I sat down with a highlighter and those HOA documents. Took me back to my auditing days. As I suspected, the bylaws were crystal clear. Article 7 spelled it out plainly: pools, patios, and backyard improvements belonged solely to the homeowners. No gray area. The next morning, I had a keypad lock installed on my gate, top of the line, according to the locksmith. I also posted a new sign: private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. If Karen wanted to push boundaries, I was going to make sure mine were visible and enforced. Things were quiet for a couple of days. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Then came Tuesday. I came home early, nursing a headache. As I pulled into the driveway, I heard voices, raised voices, coming from my backyard. My gut told me it wasn't good. I hurried through the house and out the back door, only to find Tyler straddling the fence, halfway into my yard. His face was red with frustration. He didn't even try to hide what he was doing. He started yelling that I had no right to keep him out, that his mom said he was allowed to swim whenever he wanted. I told him to get down and leave, calmly but firmly. Instead, He started accusing me of discrimination and violating HOA rules. The nerve. I pulled out my phone and told him he had 10 seconds before I called the police. He climbed back over the fence, but not before yelling that I'd regret this. I thought it was over. I should have known better. Barely 20 minutes later, I was fixing a cup of tea when I heard sirens. I looked out the front window just in time to see 2 police cars stop in front of my house. Officers walked up the drive, and I met them at the door. The lead officer introduced himself as Officer Thompson. He explained they'd received a 911 call from a minor claiming I'd threatened and illegally detained him. I was floored. The kid had actually called the cops on me. I invited them in and calmly laid it all out, showed them the previous footage, the attempt to climb my fence, the photos of my posted signs, and highlighted sections of the bylaws. They took it all in. Officer Thompson reviewed the evidence while his partner took notes. Then we heard the screech. Karen burst through my front door, uninvited, shrieking like she was auditioning for a soap opera. She accused me of child endangerment, threatened legal action, and demanded answers. Officer Thompson didn't flinch. He calmly explained what they'd uncovered. Tyler had trespassed on private property and made a false emergency call. Karen paled. They brought Tyler over from where he'd been waiting on the sidewalk and explained to him, in no uncertain terms, the seriousness of what he'd done. He wilted before our eyes, the false bravado gave way to stammering apologies. Then the question came, did I want to press charges? I looked at Tyler, really looked. He was just a kid, misguided, yes, but scared now. I told the officers I'd settle for a formal warning this time, but if there was a next time, I'd pursue it to the full extent of the law. The officers were thorough. They documented everything and made it clear that this wasn't a slap on the wrist. Next time, there'd be cuffs. Karen tried to object again, but Officer Thompson wasn't having it. He reminded her that being HOA president did not grant her any legal exemptions. Then, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he explained that false 911 calls could lead to fines up to $5,000 and possible jail time. 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten by Tyler. The apology was forced, the penmanship nervous, but it was something. He promised never to trespass again. I could tell someone had been hovering over his shoulder as he wrote it. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't ready to let it go. She filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, claiming I was hostile and demanding they mandate pool access for board members. She even argued I should be fined for installing a lock without prior approval. The board meeting came. I arrived with everything in order, copies of the bylaws, photos, the police report. I needn't have bothered. The board was already fed up. Turns out, Karen had been pushing her presidential powers on everyone. One board member asked her to show exactly where the bylaws granted her access to private pools. She floundered. Another member pointed out how she tried to get store discounts by claiming to represent the HOA. Then the floodgates opened. Homeowners stood up and shared their own stories. One said she tried to demand a key to their shed, another said she tried to dictate what flowers they could plant. The board unanimously rejected her complaint. Then came the real bombshell. George Harrison, the treasurer, made a motion for a vote of no confidence in Karen's presidency. It passed 7-1. Karen was removed on the spot. Her departure was dramatic, she shrieked, knocked over a water pitcher, and called us all jealous. Theatrics all the way to the end. But the story didn't stop there. The board launched a review of the HOA's finances. They uncovered over $8,000 in unauthorized personal purchases on the HOA credit card. Karen had claimed they were community expenses. The board voted to pursue criminal charges. 2 weeks later, the police returned to our neighborhood, this time with a warrant. Karen was arrested for felony embezzlement. As they led her away in cuffs, she screamed that it was all my fault. I just stood by my window, cup of tea in hand, watching the flashing lights once again. And this time, I allowed myself a quiet smile. Some people think they're above the rules, but age teaches you that the truth has a way of catching up. Always does. If you've ever dealt with a nosy neighbor, HOA headaches, or just enjoy a good story where common sense wins out, go ahead and hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life neighborhood tales that prove standing your ground never goes out of style.